My fellow Americans, how are we feeling about endless war and endless spending? Because your tax dollars can't even fund the interest payments on our government debt anymore. So, the illusion that you're paying taxes to fund any sort of thing going on in the American government is just delusion. If you still believe it, there are people that are waking up. And I hope that 2024 is the year of awakening. Because I, for one, am so sick of us always being able to come up with money for foreign aid and for people who are not citizens of this country but are coming here anyway. We always have money to do certain things, but we never have money to do things that make life better for the people that are already here. We never have money to fix things at home. We only have money to fix things everywhere else in the world. And I just don't know how everyone is feeling. And what point do we have to get to before we decide to do something about it? Everything boils down to money and its proxy, power. So, the war in Ukraine, right? You don't have to believe anything that you hear from either side, but the fact is, it is suspicious that the president's son was in there as an energy czar prior to this whole conflict unfolding. And, my understanding of the order of events dealing with Ukraine is that it's all about natural gas. We were positioning and building infrastructure in Ukraine to sell natural gas, Ukrainian natural gas, to the European energy market. Supposedly, when Trump got elected, this derailed that plan, and the Nord Stream pipeline was built using Russian natural gas instead of Ukrainian natural gas. The people that had an interest in this endless revenue stream, because once you get the European market hooked on Ukrainian natural gas, that's a revenue stream that will exist for a very long time and will make the people that are involved with that project very rich for a very long time. So conveniently, the war starts, the Nord Stream pipeline gets blown up, creating an energy shortage of natural gas in Europe. And the belief among the people that are suspicious that this is about resources and not actually about freedom and democracy, they are making a compelling argument that it is awfully convenient that the Nord Stream pipeline gets blown up mysteriously and no one investigates the perpetrators of that action. Meanwhile, there's no interest in peace talks. I don't know what the end game of this war is going to be, other than, war profit as well. You make money without growth by reallocating resources from this group over here and giving them to this group over here. If you can't generate genuine growth, a rising tide floats all boats. But when you aren't in a period of growth and you want more resources, your only option under those circumstances is to take them from another group of people who have something that you want. So that's war number one. War number two is, just starting to kick off with Israel and Palestine and potentially Iran, now that Iran has launched a response to the death at the hands of Israeli missiles of two of the high-ranking Iranian generals. Now, there's a tale of two cities here, because on one hand, if you listen to one side of the news, it's pretty sad that you have to listen to two sides of the news to try to even understand what's actually going on, because it's all just lies and bullshit. But on one side, they claim that the Iron Dome is nearly impenetrable, and this just shows how robust Israel's defenses are, because there's no damage to the country. And then on the other side of the news, the claims are being made that because Iran only struck military targets, you will not see the damage that was done to some of the military bases in that country. And the truth is that Iranian missiles, which were not the latest and greatest of their weapons stockpiles, were able to penetrate this, were able to hit military targets within that country. And at the same time, Israel spent $1.5 billion in a few hours defending against missile strikes with their military, their missile defense grid. On the other side, Iran spent a few $100 million launching their attack. Some of the drones that were launched apparently were, DJI drones that only cost a few $100s, which are then being targeted by multi-million-dollar ballistic missile defense systems, and you're shooting down a $300 drone with a $20 million missile. So in a war of attrition, who's going to run out of money first? Doesn't seem very economically feasible to sustain a missile defense system in order to defend against someone in the region who believes that you are acting belligerently and behaving in a manner as if no consequences will ever exist for what you're doing. Now, I'm not going to take sides in a war that I don't think should be started to begin with. I think that the cost of human life is not worth any amount of land, money, or power. And it seems like a lot of human beings, especially ones in power, disagree with me on that front. But that's my stance. And as far as I'm concerned, Israel and Iran can both prosper or go fuck themselves. And I frankly don't really care which one they choose. I would prefer if they would choose peace. But from the way that people who know a lot more about this topic than I do are talking, it sounds like Netanyahu, the leader of Israel, is likely to lose his position of power in that country as their leader if he does not respond. It's likely that someone will run against him, criticize his weakness and inability to respond, and you'll have a leadership change, and then the war will proceed. Now, all this stuff is tied together because you have Iran manufacturing weapons for Russia in the war with Russia-Ukraine. You have Iran potentially taking the $6 billion that they were given and helping fund the Hamas attacks against Israel. So you have a coalition of at least three there. And then you have people watching the financial sanctions that were imposed against Russia in the broader world and discussing the acceleration of an alternative to the US dollar as the unit of exchange for petroleum in the world, and also, creating a gold-backed currency that could be an alternative to the current world reserve currency that is the US dollar. A lot of people don't like seeing the US dollar wielded as a weapon by the United States, and that's exactly what we're trying to do with Russia, is punish them financially, monetarily, and make them unable to trade oil on the open market, amongst other things. if we play this hand, if we continue to play this hand, who is China going to side with if they are forced to choose a side? Because Russia has no problem with them taking Taiwan. But if they really want that land, as well as access to GPU chips that can run AI, which we are telling them that they can't have, are they going to side with the United States, or are they going to side with the countries that they're already forming a coalition with in order to create the BRICS currency? I think it's very likely that the U.S. could get involved, at least as a proxy, in already the Russia-Ukraine conflict. If Israel does get into a hot war, to show that they are not to be messed with in that region. They're still the big dog on campus and no one can touch them, and they project this image of power by responding. I can't see America not supporting them, at least deploying troops to help with logistics, even if we're not on the front line, sending more money, hundreds of billions of dollars probably, along with weapons, more weapons than we already provide. So then we're going to be sending hundreds of billions to Ukraine, hundreds of billions to Israel. And if China decides that the U.S. is getting spread thin enough at that point that they feel comfortable and confident going after Taiwan, which the U.S. is also pledged to defend, then we could very quickly find ourselves in a position where we have a three-front war. We're already in a one-front war, whether you like it or not, with no discussion of peace or de-escalation whatsoever. We want that war. So, I mean, the future for America looks pretty bleak, because as long as we're going to divert resources to war and potentially get involved with loss of American life, if some of these other conflicts emerge, at what point do we remain unwilling to have uncomfortable conversations in this country about some pretty minor changes we could make and some things that we could address head on instead of ignoring them to avoid actual open war? At what point do we find uncomfortable conversations and criticisms of elected officials and other groups that have way too much power inside this country? I'm specifically talking about the investment banks, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, JP Morgan Chase, Merrill Lynch. If you look at the top holders of the S&P 500 companies, you're going to find a lot of the same names hold enough shares to be influential of all these companies. So on the face of it, you see 500 companies, but on behind the scenes, there's a group of 10 individuals that have way more control over the global system, and these global behemoth corporations then should be allowed. And the regulators, the governments that are supposed to regulate these companies, their elections, the elected representatives are being funded by the same money that powers these corporations. So you've got a very small group of individuals that dictates policy in the political ecosystem, as well as business policy inside these corporate environments. And we as Americans, I'm starting to see people recognize the fact that the system is predicated on endless war, the fact that the system is predicated on endless growth. We live on a finite planet, and we, the people who have to work for these organizations have to be able to feed ourselves. We have to be able to eat. We need a roof over our heads. And it would be nice if we could provide for our families and have a decent quality of life. And that just keeps eroding year over year. I mean, who out there is not seeing on the cost side things just multiply? Groceries, what are they, twice as expensive? Are they 3 times as expensive as they were 4 years ago, 5 years ago? How much more expensive is gas? I mean, I remember up until 2020, gas was in the $1 something a gallon range, and now we're back into the $3 a gallon territory. Homes, you know, I mean, homes were, the average mortgage payment prior to 2020 was $1,800. Now the average mortgage payment, if you get a mortgage today, is $3,200. So on the expense side, you're seeing things multiply, not percentage increases, but multiply by factors of 2, 3, 4. You know, you go from the median home price being $200,000 to $415,000 in just a few years. Gas doubles and triples. The cost of food is getting to the point where it used to be a lot of work. You know, the idea of thinking about homesteading, growing your own food, man, that sounds like a lot of work when groceries are so cheap. Why not just go buy groceries? It's getting to the point where homesteading and growing your own food may be a very smart move, because if cost escalation continues along the lines that it's been going the past couple of years, it's going to get out of control very quickly. And the fact that we've put ourselves in a position, we've doubled our national debt. We went from 18 trillion in 2019 to 34 trillion, maybe 35 as we speak right now. Double that again in 4 years and you're at 60 trillion. I mean, we already cannot pay just the interest requirement on that amount with our tax revenue. So things are just going to get more and more out of control as we spend what we don't have to keep the status quo. And if we don't address it now, it's going to get to the point where conflict is going to be inevitable. So the longer that we just hold our tongues out of fear of social repercussions, lose your job for saying the wrong thing, bringing up uncomfortable topics, you know, discussing the idea that maybe extreme left and extreme right politics is not good for middle class America, moderates in America, normal people who just want to live a decent life, have some free time to spend with their family, do good work wherever they work, and get paid an amount of money that allows them to, let's say, own a home, to have a family in, instead of being renters who are at the mercy of whatever landlords want to choose. You're able to invest in a property, build equity, have something to pass on to your children, future generations, instead of just becoming a class of renters and impoverished sycophants who just go along with whatever everybody else says you should support. You know, everybody is just parroting what you're being told to support, and nobody is thinking this through about where we're headed. It's the blind leading the blind. I mean, there are some people with a vision, but it's not a vision that is good for the voters of America. It's a vision that is good for the people who already have too much power as it is. So, I mean, if we're not willing to stand up, and I mean, at this point, just do your civic duty. Just go to the polls and vote against everybody who's in office right now, because they're all part of the problem. Even if they seem like they're not, they're just better at bullshitting you than the rest of them. this system, as long as it is allowed to exist in peace and stability, as long as these politicians believe that their seats are secure, no olive branch, no carrot will be offered. As long as the stick is working to beat you into submission, while they import votes. You know, they ignore veterans and homeless in this country, and they give $10,000 debit cards to immigrants that are coming across an open border. And I mean, we've spent the last 20 years taking our shoes off at the airport. The Patriot Act, we were told that we needed to surveil Americans to protect us at home. And now we let people who we don't even know who the fuck they are, we're letting them in 10,000 a day at the southern border. And you can also decide to disbelieve that, but you're welcome to visit it. Many people have reported on it. Not the mainstream media, but many citizen journalists and social media users, people that care about the future of this country, are paying attention. But we've been put in a situation where it's very difficult to organize within the framework of those social media companies that don't want you to organize. They don't want the status quo to change. So we need to find a way to speak to each other without censorship. We need to find a way to start talking about our problems before they become so large that conflict becomes inevitable. Because we are still in a position where we can talk this out. But very quickly we can find ourselves in a death spiral, headed for war. Whether it's civil war, like the movie that's in the theaters right now, or whether it's another world war, neither one will be good for anyone at any level, whether you're rich and powerful or whether you're poor and desperate. War is not the answer. Coming up with common sense solutions that benefit humanity and getting rid of toxic power structures where the needs of the few outweigh the needs of the many at the moment. And we need to switch that back to the needs of the many outweigh the greed and the needs of the few. I really am praying that we can have a return to some sort of common sense and civil discourse inside this country, because the 329 million versus the 1 million that want some sort of crazy agenda, we have the power in numbers to make this happen. It's just a matter of organizing and making the decision that we don't want to tolerate this continued escalation of conflict and the continued consolidation of wealth and power away from the rational, calm, peaceful citizens and human beings in this world.